Here we go, live on Facebook. Hello, everybody at the Elephant and Castle community. I am Nick from Retribe, and joining me today on International Women's Day is Stacy Idema, who's been with us before, but I'm so glad to have you back, Stacy. How are you doing today?
I'm doing really well, Nick. Thank you. And thanks for acknowledging International Women's Day.
Well, to me, every day is
Yeah.
it's something where being a man in my generation and doing the stuff that I do, I think I need to. It's not just Women's Day, but recognizing the feminine, the sacred feminine, and the power and the love that goes alongside of that. And the balance of the yin and the yang, and the masculine and the feminine. So, for me, I think I need to always kind of recognize, the women in my life, which you are one, and I'm very grateful for that. That we've got to know each other over the last couple of years. Can you? So very very grateful that you could be here on this day, and can you just kind of reintroduce yourself to the community and let everybody know who you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Nick, for this. This is fun to be back. I am Stacy Karen Idema, and I am what I call a whole human business coach. And I work with women owned, women led, co founded businesses, really helping women achieve more and more not being what you think it is while sacrificing less. So I'm very focused on the female population. But to your point, we um, we all need the balance, the harmony, not balance. We need the harmony of both the feminine and the masculine. And I think last time I was on this call, I was going through or just starting the process of my innovator visa, and I've since returned to the U.S. Was granted my visa, and now I'm back in London. So it's kind of fun on this International Women's Day to be a woman of international origin, born and raised in the States, and now living and doing business in the UK. So it's actually really fun for me.
Yeah, it is an amazing story because I've been able to follow it,
Yeah.
throughout your journey of when you first came here and to where you are now. And I'm really interested with regards to the innovation visa, and it's targeting of women in business. Am I correct?
That's
Or
right.
or elevating. So you've been a business coach for quite a while, and
Yeah.
obviously you saw the necessity to, or you probably saw where the problems were. Am I correct?
For
And
sure.
then, so maybe let's go that. Where were the problems, and what are the problems that you see in the today's corporate world, business world?
Mm.
That's a big
Um,
one.
it, it is a big one. So I'll start with the female aspect of it because it's what I know most intimately. Women have so much more um, power and knowledge and just inner strength for which we don't give ourselves credit. So having I mean, frankly, my entire life has been in business. Both of my parents were business owners. I was married to a small business owner, um, 26 years in corporate, and now have been coaching for many, many years. And we go out of our ways to be in that feminine. We're nurturing, we're caring, we look at the big picture, we see problems, we, look for opportunities to solve, but yet we're not good at doing it inwards. We're not good at taking care of ourselves, loving ourselves, saying no. There's this perception that we always have to say yes. And so when I started on this journey specific to the visa, it was very focused on helping women in business because, from that business standpoint, they actually grow businesses at the same rate that men do. We just happen to do it in a different way. Yet, when we get to certain points that are really like key breaking points, in that £1 million, $1 million, €1 million, it's that million mark for women. That's often when they need an investment in their company, or they need to seek partners or additional individuals with whom would be good um, accents, or what's the word I'm looking for? It would really heighten their business in a different way. But with most of the women, I don't want to say all, with most of the women, there's a family attachment, whether it's that they're caring for loved ones, young children, older children, family, other family members. And so there's the breaking point between going all in and doing those things and looking at their business differently, and then not feeling like they've let their family down, because it often requires how they manage their time, how they manage their money, how they look at risk. What is risk? What does that really mean? Because I think women more often minimize the amount of risk they're willing to take just by way of the actions that they don't even think about that are more risky. So the visa and me deciding to do business here was really about how could I help extend myself of what I even know to be true, where I have stepped up and done things that I minimize, yet those things that I have chosen to do have gotten me to a further place. And even beyond that has grown into how can I, and this I know is a very hot topic for you, how can I actually help even empower the investor world, it being mostly men? How can I help them understand women better and how they do business? And how can I even possibly help them change their business and how they do business, but doing it in a space where it is not contentious and cutthroat? It's how do we empower each other and do it better together?
Mm. I think I like looking at the sporting world as a kind of area of focus, but what I know that the sporting world is a mirror to the corporate world as well.
Mm. Yes.
And because they like to use a lot of the same language in terms of like being tough and resilient and high performance attitudes and everything. And I think about the history of where we are today, in 2022, when there's just as many conflicts as there ever has been. But um, the corporate world that I started out in was one that was very much founded on very traditionally masculine ideas that I noted had come back from, because I did history at university, and I noted that, in the, say, the creation of sports organizations in the UK, for example, they were traditionally set up by people of privilege, people who had time to volunteer in coaching and setting up sports teams. And they brought in this attitude kind of out of a world war, of the Winston Churchill type speeches, which is we'll die for our team, we'll die for our cause, we'll die to win, go through a wall for one another. Very, very harmful language when you really listen to it and you put that in context to, number one, a sports team, which is meant to be for fun, and number two, a corporate work environment where you're meant to just be at work. You're not meant to be using this kind of language with each other, of calling each other warriors. Right. And let's fight. Why do I have to go to work to fight? And that was very much instilled in me that to succeed, I needed to fight and I needed to win and I needed to be in competition all the time. Mm-hmm. And I imagine that because I'm a man in that corporate environment, that's those same principles and values and energy were put upon both women as well. So you found that the women who were succeeding in those, and you kind of look at the shoulder pad, the power shoulder pad wearing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it was quite scary. And I had come across some women in very high profile positions in my working days, and they mirrored a masculine energy.
Yeah.
So now knowing more about, like as you talked about, kind of a sacred feminine energies and processes and compassion and nurturing, it's part of all of our lives.
Yes.
And I'm just wondering, like, what are the struggles with trying to bring that language into these traditionally masculine environments to not only work with women, but for that to also then to go out into the culture of the workforce where, can we start to change these old ideas into bringing in new concepts and new ideas that I truly believe are more powerful. But when you use the language of vulnerability and compassion, you're going to be, oh no, that's weak. So, what are the challenges that you're seeing in in trying to elevate and amplify the idea of women in the workplace, but also of the sacred feminine?
Oh, what a great question. Um, I would say probably the biggest challenge is um, they feel and appear soft,
Mhm.
and they're so the language um, the language used. I'm still, frankly, I'm still attempting to figure it out myself.
Mm.
Um, because I believe that it's not just about the specific words, it's about the conversations and who's willing to have the conversations. Because there's enough smart people out there that already know the impact that women make and have and empower businesses to be. So finding probably somebody who's not afraid to have those conversations. And part of what I've been doing is learning what words resonate most positively,
Mm.
to continue those conversations. Because then you could go back and say, oh, it's very innovative or even disruptive for women to be in these spaces, which seems it's if there's creativity in that, which is more of the feminine, but there's also there is a harshness around it. And so I'm not sure that I even yet have the answer. What I do know is those that do at least understand it or are very aware of it are those that reach out and want to engage. And those that it triggers are very quick to tell me that I'm doing something wrong and that I should be doing something in a different way, either by way that they don't understand who I'm attempting to help because they want it to be very, very myopic and focused, or that I can't be doing what I'm doing and doing it successfully. So there's a lot of assumptions and very linear mindset around that. So I think it'll even take work on my end. But the one thing that I love, and this is where I even remind myself every day, is I want to have those conversations. It's, even if there's one that comes to me and says, I don't like what you're doing and it's not going to work, I actually want to have that conversation with him because I have the patience and I have the empathy and I know what I've done in the past to create that space that allows the conversation to continue on. So, in that is where I believe I'll find the languages that will morph and evolve to help bring that more into perspective.
When you coach a man in a
Mhm.
high power position, one on one, and I imagine you hear a different version or a language on that one on one than perhaps that person has in their work environment when they're around a team.
Mhm.
And I'm kind of alluding to the faces that we put on, the shadows that we build around us to try to have to build certain perceptions of us. Because I know I have several. If I go into a certain environment, I want people to see me a certain way, and especially if it's a part as a position of leader, you are again told of these old ideas of like you have to have the answers. You've got to be willing to fight. You've got to be at your desk longer than everybody else. Again, I'm kind of putting all these kind of tough old
Yeah.
ideas around toughness,
Yeah.
and then when they're in a one-on-one with you, how does it change? What are the things that you see in their vulnerability, from the images that they put on in when they step out of the office to the workforce to when they're actually one-on-one with you?
The biggest is body language, and it becomes soft. Um,
Mm-hmm.
And I would say I probably have had more quiet time with men than I do with women. And I think I've come to accept that I create a space that's safe. And so for them to, and I've had far more of this than I even knew at the time, all those years in corporate and working in the environments that I worked in and with really the executive, the leaders, the men that I worked with, I have seen more of head and hands, if you will,
Mhm.
where they've been able to take a deep breath and just think, oh my God, I can take a moment and breathe. And um, there's also more talk about the personal aspect than the business aspect, to be quite frank. Um, I think it becomes so overwhelming, and they talk more about the emotional pieces than what they would probably ever lead on. And I think that's why there is so much, especially on certain social media platforms, where young CEO men are starting to speak out about their mental health journey, being in those leadership roles, and how some have chosen to step down because of the pressure.
Mhm.
Um, because they're not, none of us were, I mean, certainly more now than it is when we grew up, but we weren't taught that mental health and emotional health was part of your physical health and your spiritual health and your sexual health. So it takes a time and space to be able to start talking more freely about those things and the impact.
No, I love that. There's a couple of things I want to talk about, but the whole idea around leadership, I think, is something that, what is a leader, and what are the traits that leaders need to have. I think it's a really interesting conversation because for me, the idea of leadership is changing. But I'd like to go back to we'll probably we'll park that one over, but talk about
Okay.
leadership in a minute. But I want to go back to the spaces you create, because you've mentioned that a couple of times.
Yeah.
And I mention it to people too, and they're like, "What are you talking about creating spaces?" But for me, I have my idea around creating a safe space. But can you give us your how you set it up and how important it is to you and what it means to you and your clients?
Oh, no one's ever asked me this before. Mm. Um, Actually, I believe it's through my own presence, my own way in which I just even settle into myself and create that comfort within myself and to lean back and allow to receive. So, in opening myself up as just a human, um, there is vulnerability for men to go to other men to talk about things. There's also a vulnerability of men to talk to women, and especially strange women. But I also believe that if you are comfortable in yourself and the space that you offer, I think that inherently just makes it easier. Um, I would have to honestly say it's harder. I find it actually more difficult with women. It takes longer to build that relationship and that rapport. There is there is definitely a different level of protectiveness. And so it takes a while for women to trust other women, not because they don't want to trust them, but they have such a hard time trusting themselves because they have been required to lead more masculine and have sacrificed and burn out without acknowledging or even wanting to own it that they've burnt out. They just keep going because there's this thought that it's just one more thing, it's just one more thing. So I think for me, it's been much easier with men. And for women, it's been much harder just by way of how they go about protecting themselves. And it's just different. So it is a
It's
lot
funny.
of
It's
sitting back and just being. Yeah.
yeah. I normally tell a really dark story about myself. Just tell
Did you?
something very, very, yeah. And then the guy goes, "Well, that's happened to you." And then then the kind of they feel more comfortable in kind of disclosing certain things because if they think that, I'm willing to share really embarrassing or things that I find very regretful, then they can be a bit more willing to feel safe with me. So I'm, fortunate or unfortunately, I've got some pretty
Yeah.
dark stories. So, that's what I use to kind of create safe spaces. But it's really interesting, Stacy, that it's International Women's Day, and we're talking about men. And it's funny because I saw a LinkedIn post today from a woman who she said that with regards to the imbalance that we have in work culture, in just social culture with regards to violence towards women and inequality towards women in pay structures, etc. I mean, these are unrefutable. These are facts
Yeah.
that there's an imbalance in the world today with regards to men and women, and it was just really interesting. Always and it's like women getting together to come up with ideas about how to make more safe spaces for themselves and how to reduce the danger that they feel on public transport, etc. And she just said simply, men are the missing link to these problems. And it's really interesting that, I think that my message on International Women's Day is for men to start holding space for men, to
Mhm.
hold each other accountable to transformation and to not have shame in these words of divine feminine and vulnerability and compassion and nurturing. These are beautiful words, but we associate them with women, but they're very much in the man.
Yeah.
And I think that for me on International Women's Day, men stand up and hold the. One guy says, "I'm not going to be a bystander," or oh, I forget the word he used, but it was great. But he's going to start holding other when he starts seeing things. Up, oh, this was it. I'm not going to be a bystander. I'm going to be an upstander.
Mm. Okay.
And I was like, yes, don't sit by and watch things happen that are wrong, and start holding men accountable to these ideas of transformation. Because I know it was something that it's hard to say, when you're telling somebody that they don't recognize that there is some imbalance and some problems in their lives that are created by lack of showing emotions and trying to be all tough.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard to say, hey, buddy, there's an easier way and it's more kind on you and definitely more kind on other people. Do you want to give it a go? People are very defensive. Oh, no, I'm okay, and
I'm okay.
yeah, oh, I'm okay. No, you're not. You're stressed and you're tired and you get angry and you can't, so you're not okay. And I think it's really hard. I think that's the struggle that I sense from what you're trying to do, but also what we are trying to do
Yeah.
is to infiltrate these traditionally masculine environments and say, hey, we are changing. Let's embrace it. The world is waking up, even though we see a lot of stuff out there. Let's embrace it and try to support each other and hold each other through this transformation.
You said such a great thing. Why don't we embrace it? Uh, what man wouldn't want to be the pioneer of something new, but something that's not new, right? Change is going to happen regardless. The thought that you get to create a new legacy and you get to be you get to be a pioneer around it. Um, that that I actually wrote about that not that long ago, and will continue to write about that. Change happens. You get to decide how you want it to go. Let's figure this out. Because what? Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. We keep getting it keeps smacking us in the face that the world is changing. And if we're going to sit in these old ways, we're going to be, with what's going on in the Ukraine right now,
Yeah.
power down, right? From a white man down. and we see it over and over and over again. And I think that the world is like, you know what? Enough is enough. Men, women, let's not let this happen again. And I truly believe, I don't know if it's going to happen in my generation or the next generation, but I know the world is going to survive. This planet's going to be here. And
Yeah.
the people on it are, you can't help the rise of the sacred feminine. It's happening. And men and women, everybody feels it. So yeah, like we were talking about, let's just kind of shake off, and it's funny because someone said that the traditional masculinity looks to the past for solutions.
Mm.
Sacred feminine, traditional feminine looks to the future and processes to get to, a new way, a more enlightened and compassionate and caring way. So let's stop saying in the good old days, and let's start looking at in the now. What can I do today to make some change? Anyway, um, what I wanted to talk to you about, you're settling here, and
Yeah.
I saw your post today about the moves that you've made,
Yes.
and I saw also that you're acknowledging your change of language, which I thought was really compassionate, and around your journey to be here. But um, what was driving you? What has been the energy behind you to? I mean, I thought I moved a lot and I packed a lot, but you've done an awful lot of moving around and moving within spaces over the last couple of years.
Wow.
What's kept you going? What's made you go, oh, I'm just going to put my feet up here and I'm staying here because I can't be bothered? What's kept the Stacy going to you now, looking for a new place, which I want to hear too more about the 15-month-old kid on your
My
flat visit.
tour.
But yeah, on your tour.
Uh,
Yeah,
um,
what's
so, I mean, to be fair, I would say the precipitous was just the change in myself, the change I knew I had to make, and going through a divorce and making the change, making the decision to take myself out of my current environment and look at other and explore other environments. And that's actually what brought me to the UK last year. um, and I had no idea this is where I would be. Frankly, none. It was a 90-day exploration in a different country, in a country I had never been to before, and I happened to land in the middle of lockdown, as you know, because 33 days later, you were my first, you know, inhuman face-to-face conversation. It was that was quite a new perspective on just human interaction. Um, so I think what has kept me going is acknowledging that the environment with which I created, so I was my own obstacle, was not going to support the deeper, soulful, like my bigger purpose, something I had been hiding and keeping tucked away for so long. When I was 5 days into my visit last year, I said 90 days isn't going to be enough. I'll stay 180. 5 weeks
mm,
into it, I said 6 months isn't going to be enough. I need to start exploring what it would take to be here longer. And that set me on my journey. It so happened that I found an immigration attorney through the host of my Airbnb. His best friend's wife was an expat, so
mm,
you never know who you meet. Um, the bouncing around from place to place. When I made the decision to return, I also made the decision that I wasn't going to find even a temporary permanent spot when I was in the US because I didn't know how long it would take. And I was and when you have friends that have offered their space, you are really at the mercy of what is going on in their life as well. So a lot of the bouncing around came from friends who were willing to have me. However, as their life changed and morphed and evolved, then I needed to go find a new place. So it was never in the cards, as they say, to do anything like that. But yet, I knew where I was going and I was returning here. There was no question in my mind. And it was probably one of those biggest tests of something that had lived so long deep inside of me. And frankly, getting very honest about what are my strengths, what drives me, and just moving forward. So the bouncing around was really just an outcome of a decision I made, with no intention to for it to be that way. But it also gifted me so much more time with family and friends that I haven't had in probably 30 years, really, to be honest. And I wouldn't trade it for the world. I am very glad to be back and to be looking for a place to call home, which is part of what I was doing last night. And it's been a different learning journey on what it's like in the US to look for places to live and what it's like here, which I knew would be different. I already knew that, but yeah, hanging out with a 15-month-old yesterday, wandering around in a very small apartment, trying to get a sense for how it would feel when I was there, while it's still full of their stuff and their living and their environment. And a very cute 15-year-old following me around around the
15
apartment.
month, 15-month old, right? 15-month old, yeah, yeah. Not a 15-year-old boy follow you around. Yeah. Um, I imagine some people who might tune into this for the first time, in the Southern community, they hear two people with North American accents, and I think it's, first of all, that's the beauty of London. It's so multicultural, and there's something about this city that, I moved to the UK in 1989. I'm 51, so I was 18 at the time. And in that time, I've moved countries, a half a dozen times. And something about, coming back to London, it's always pulled me back here. And the move back here 3 years ago, back from Canada to here, it was probably the first move that I made that I didn't plan. It was just kind of laid out for me. And it finally felt like I was in a place where I belong and where I had purpose. Because a lot of people will say to me, where are you from? And I say Canada, and they go, what are you doing here? And I'm like, this is London. It's one of the most magnificent cities on the planet. But everyone always thinks the other place is better than where they are. And I'm interested to know your kind of feelings of being drawn to the city, because, for me, like I say, I know that for some reason I can't explain it, but I'm living in Soho. I'm of service. I can help people who I know I can help. They're on my doorstep. And I just feel that gives me just this, I am where I'm meant to be. And
Mm-hmm.
I think I am where I'm meant to be is a really powerful statement, for someone who never felt like they were meant to be where they were and always felt kind of in very nice places. I lived on
Mm-hmm.
Venice Beach not on the beach, but in a place on Venice Beach in LA where every day I woke up and it was like beautiful sunny skies and it was
Yeah.
absolutely glorious. And apart from, I just didn't feel like I belonged there though. I didn't feel like home. So I'm just interested, like there's something about the city that you said you needed more than 90 days, more than 180. And then now to find a place that you can call home, and this journey now being like a couple of years for you.
Yeah.
How does it feel? Can you say that? Can you say I am where I'm meant to be?
I don't know if I ever told you this, Nick, but the first time we met in Soho and you gave me my first walking tour, and
Hmm.
I believe it was after we departed, or maybe it was even where I met you. In that day, and it was still pretty much in lockdown, so it was very quiet.
Hmm.
And I remember you telling me that, but there were four other couples on a corner somewhere in Soho, and they all spoke different languages. And I
Hmm.
didn't know. I didn't know. I One was Italian, one was French, but I didn't know the other two, and I certainly didn't know enough. I didn't know anything of what they were saying. And I stood there and thought, oh, yeah, I'm so small in such a
Hmm.
big world, but yet I could have such an impact in the the bigger world, and this is where I need to be. So it was really that moment, that humbling moment of, um, it's a learning experience, and I'm constantly desiring to learn. And so, short of going back to school, this becomes my learning, but I also get to share it and I get to live it, and I just get to grow from it. So it was really that was the, it needs to be longer than the 6 months, and it needs to be, I mean, even sitting with the attorney, and she's like, "Have you considered indefinite leave to?" And she didn't even get it out of her mouth. "Are you considering indefinite leave to remain or citizenship?" And I'm like, "Yep, yep." No question, no resistance, just yes. That's it. It was like I couldn't even stop it from coming out of my mouth. Um, this is where I'm meant to be.
Beautiful. Isn't it
Yeah,
fun when we get out of our own way,
yeah.
the miracles that can happen and where we can be guided to. Um, oh, you said something I wanted to bring up again. Oh, darn it. You darn you put me off because you said I am where I'm meant to be. And I had a question lined up for you.
And back to your earlier comment, I think that's probably what drove me through all those moves. So even now being here, I can't wait to unpack all of my toiletries and not to live in bags.
Yeah.
I can't wait to not look at my suitcases. I don't want to feel like I'm on a vacation, because I'm not. I want to pack my bags to go on a vacation somewhere, hopefully sometime soon. However, I'm here and I'm where I'm meant to be. So I want the rest of my environment to reflect that.
Yeah. I know what it was you said. You said that you like to learn.
Mhm.
You're striving to learn. And I know in particular with you have a particular goal to do something. And a
Mhm.
lot of what it requires for you to do is to get out of your comfort zone and create a lot of content, um, which is something you've said to me you struggle with, even though I think you're really good at it.
Yeah.
What are when you say you like to learn,
Mhm.
that it sounds like it's an enjoyable process.
Mhm.
So what do you say to people who are struggling in their learning? And I know that like you getting out of your comfort zone to do content is one, but let's disregard that.
Yeah.
Let's think about other ways of learning and getting out of our, again, trying to get out of our way to be taught, to learn, to try something where we feel uncomfortable. But
Yeah.
what gets us through that stage? Because I know a lot of people who love to read and learn that way. I struggle with it. I struggle with it because my eyes, I have one eye that's dominant,
Okay.
and for me, I literally have to read one word at a time. I can't
Okay.
speed read or anything.
Yeah.
So I really struggle with the old good old book learning. And I feel like I'm dumb. You know,
Mhm.
oh, I'm dumb because I don't like to read a book. Well, I do. I struggle to read a book.
Yeah.
Um, so I can say to myself, I'm not dumb, and I can, but the language that I use is that because we have, again, ideas around learning, which is you have to be studious and you have to be at your desk and you have to have, glasses, and you got to be smart that way. So with your learning, can you
Mm.
tell me about your process of learning and the things that you maybe struggle to and the things that you enjoy and how learning can be joyful, but also challenging?
So I learn best through people and experiences. Yes, I love to read. Yes, I love podcasts, but I take in most through those interactions. And I have such curiosity. I have a tendency to ask a lot of questions and listen, um, and then ask more questions and ask more questions. And I best absorb through that process
Mhm.
itself. So I think for those that struggle with learning or wanting to, it becomes more about exploring. So it's very common, like you were talking about the book learning, that there is the traditional ways of learning, and people get hung up on those ways of learning. And actually, through my mentors from many years ago, really about creating a bigger and broader network of people. And that is where I started to really understand that my learning came by way of others' knowledge and experiences, because I'm probably most overwhelmed by all the reading and what actually to read, what makes sense. So for me to, I'm able to synthesize through that verbal learning and the auditory. And I think in that, that has also helped me understand. It's helped me become really comfortable with what I do really well. So there's things, certain things that I know hands down I struggle with, and now I'm at the point where I'm choosing to give those up, especially as I look to grow my business. I'm choosing to find other people that will do what I don't do well and stay focused on what I do well. But I think that it comes through exploring, and being really honest with yourself about what does feel good, because doing things that are different is uncomfortable. But when you don't put yourself in a position to at least explore that, you'll never know anything beyond that discomfort.
Mm.
So, I, even through learning, I know that I'm uncomfortable in big, large spaces with all these people because I take on a lot of their energy. But I can gravitate towards a small group and find my space in that group, or even at a small, dinner party. I do much better in that versus a huge, 200 person dinner party like that, right?
Yeah.
But I know that I have to put myself in certain situations, and I think that's really what it boils down to, is not saying I'm not good at something and you've only done that one way. It's finding other ways to do that thing and
Mhm.
then figuring out what works best for you.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Yeah. We have to. I think that's the thing. It's about challenging ourselves,
Yeah.
and I do have a tendency of getting into a comfort zone. And specifically, my big thing is around eating, because my hips really messed up and I don't like going to the gym and it's really, really bad. And I have to have a full hip replacement and I'm sulking and I'm like, do you know what? I'm going to go get I'm going to shuffle to Tesco's and get some Pringles. And, um, and it's just comfort for me, but to challenge myself every time I do, and it is just a question of like, instead of shuffling to Tesco's, shuffle to the gym, try to do some stretching, just try to do something, gentle and light, but doing it, and I say it to the guys that I work with and stuff is you got to show up, you got to take action and you got to do it. But it's so easy for me, and I'm sure for other people just to sit into that place and of comfort and not put ourselves into that auditorium with 200 people where, you know, we're uncomfortable, but we know it's not like we have to do it. But by doing it, we always end up feeling better. And I just like the idea of challenge state instead of a kind of a threat state. If we just keep challenging ourselves every day, just to show up and just to take some actions in programs or in work or education, furthering ourselves, being curious with something. I was so grateful at the beginning of lockdown for challenging myself to do a yoga challenge, you know, and I did 17 out of a 30-day yoga challenge, but I got out of my comfort zone and I reflect on it. And it was like just online during lockdown. And I loved it. It was really great. But why can't I take that feeling and duplicate it in today in my needs to challenge myself? And that's where I am right now is I'm working my way through that, but I know there is a way through it.
So you, some reframes that I even use for myself is that I get to do it.
Hmm.
I think there's this perception that there's such a huge gap between where you are and what you have to do,
Hmm.
and their perception of have to do, right? How about I get to do? And to your point about showing up doesn't mean all out, right? That's very masculine.
Hmm.
But when you show up, you're saying, okay, I'm here. It's not going as well as I'd like it to be, but I'm also I get to do a few things that are going to help me make the progress that I need to make
Mm,
for me and that I get to make for me. So it's not an all or nothing thing, which is where most people head go to.
mm,
And there is a gap in between there. It's not the extremes. It's the little things and the progress that you make along the way that you get to do, that you get to learn about yourself. Um, because if you go in with that I have to, it sounds like you're doing it for somebody else. When in essence you're actually doing it for you. That's it. That's the only person you're doing it for. Because when you better yourself, everybody else wins.
you're right. You're right. So today I get to go for a nice walk in the sunshine.
You do.
Yeah. And I get to buy a donut, but I won't.
You do. You know? And you
Stacy,
get to
thank
enjoy Mother Nature. You get to do all those great things, right?
that's right. That's right. So thank you for joining us. We do have a date in the diary, don't we? Lined up. I
Yeah.
saw something. Yeah.
Next week.
Okay. Next week. All right. I will see you then. Thanks
Perfect.
for joining us.
Thanks for
Thanks
having
everybody
me.
at the Elephant and Castle community. Don't forget to join me on Thursday at 11 a.m. for another Tough Through Tender gathering. We'll see you all then. Stacy, goodbye.